Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Healing Art After Hours. I'm Shauna Robeson with Creating Space Coastal, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about just intuitive acrylic play. Just have fun with your acrylic materials and see what happens. So if you want to learn how I approach intuitive creating, check it out. This is what I intuitively created. This is upcycling a book. This was my the other side I had done previously, and very different sessions, different creations. Just let my intuition guide me. So if you want to see how I did it, stay tuned. Let's get started. All right, so tonight we are going to be working on an intuitive, I call it an intuitive acrylic play. And I just want to talk a little bit about, what is intuitive creating or intuitive painting. And of course, whenever you're creating or painting, you're always going to be using some of your intuition. I mean, that's part of the decision-making process is deciding what the next thing is and using what your own intuition to guide you. But in this case, we're going to fully be focused on that. And so I'm just going to give you some ideas of how to approach this type of process. And this is a great way to play around with a new medium or an old medium and just try different things basically fearlessly. So here are some I guess guiding principles or ideas around this. This is really a reflection of you, because you're connecting with your intuition and putting it out on the art, on the canvas. There's no preconceived ideas about what the finished piece will look like. So you're starting with kind of a blank slate, if you will, and letting your intuition guide you through the layers of the process. There's no right or wrong. So kind of like we talked about when we mentioned, when we talked about Zentangles, kind of like that too. It's like we're just trying to really think about the process of this rather than the outcome, and then see what happens with the outcome. Let go of the fear, the judgment thoughts as they arise, which, they often do, but just as they come, just be aware of them. Say, okay, thanks for thinking that, but we're going to move on, because really at any point in time, when it comes to acrylic, you could gesso or prime over the entire thing and start over. So that's the fearless part of using acrylic, is really, it's not like watercolor in that, there's really a point where I could go too far and there's no coming back from. But with acrylic, that's not true. You can always gesso over it and start from like the beginning. And you can even sand it down if you don't like the texture that's in there. So acrylics is really forgiving that way. So you can really be fearless when you're playing with it. Let your intuition guide you, like I said, layer by layer until you feel done. And you may need to step away from it for a while, or do it do a little bit each day, or however you want to do that. And then once you're done, just observe the creation. Once you feel like it's done, when your intuition guides you and says this piece is done, then you're done. And then just observe and make note of the thoughts and emotions that it elicits. What kind of feelings arise? What thoughts do you have? What did you like about the experience? What didn't you like about the experience? Whether it's using that medium, what techniques did you like or didn't like, that sort of thing. Just observe and see what you learned, because it's really, a lot about learning too. It has a lot of elements to it. You get to practice using materials maybe you haven't used. You get to try techniques you maybe haven't used before. You get to express yourself in different ways that you haven't done before, and you can really just do it in a way that's pretty safe to play with. So you can always journal about it, and I always like journaling. I think it's a good way to process things. So basically, the first step to doing this is I like to suggest having all of your supplies at your fingertips. And I'm going to go through a little more details and supplies later, but basically you're going to have whatever you're going to be painting on, and I'll talk about, like I said, the details. But your paints, your tools, whatever your mark making tools, just lay them out around you so that as you're doing the process, you can just grab things. And of course, you don't have to have everything at your fingertips, but just have enough things that you can sort of look around and be inspired by what you see, and then And then you can grab it and you don't have to always be taking a break to go search for whatever the tool it is that you want. So having a nice set of supplies around you makes it easy to just keep going with it. Now, the things that you're going to need, of course, is first what you're going to be painting on. If you don't have any canvas or anything that inspires you, just grab a cereal box or something, cut it up and make it a canvas. It's like no cost canvas. You can just gesso the side. I would gesso this side and use this side because this does have a little bit of a wax coat, glossy, and it can sometimes resist the paint more than this porous side. So I would say, use this side ideally. You could, if you decide to use both sides, because you could do, a project on each side, you could just sand it down a little bit to reduce that shininess and create some tooth that the primer is going to be able to stick to. And then you could use both sides for two different intuitive acrylic clay sessions. Of course, let one side dry completely before you do. And then what I'm going to be working on tonight, however, is I've basically upcycled an old book. Now, this one does have a lot of photography. It's very glossy pages, and it's not ideal. I would say if you can find a book with some matte pages, that would be better, because I just don't know if I'm going to have a lot of problems with it sticking. I probably do a little sanding before, because I'm going to be doing journal pages inside as well. Like I did a collage here. So this is just going to be a kind of an intuitive play journal. So, but if you pick a book, also, try not to get glossy if you can avoid it. Also try to find the ones that are bound by threads rather than glue. And you can open it up to the center, and I don't know if you can see, usually you can see where the thread binding is. It's kind of hard on the white, but you can see the threads. And then you can see the signatures from the side. Also, you might be able to see glue if there is glue. I can't get that to focus because it's too close, but so just get something that's thread bound as opposed to glue bound, because when you're working with a wet medium, that glue might get wet and might dissolve a little bit and the pages could come out, whereas that thread binding will be more secure. I already did the front page, and I'm going to basically along the same lines, using the same colors, but not necessarily, I don't have a plan exactly, other than I do want to keep those colors. And, but what I did is I did sand down the back. Now this was really shiny, and it turns out that some of these shiny books, they usually have like a laminate on them, and I did start to come down to that plastic. So I did sand it down. It's and I even kind of scraped some of that plastic off, but then I just put a coat of this GAC 200. That's the one that promotes the adhesion for non-porous surfaces. So I just put a layer of that to hopefully make my ground adhere a little better. So I prepped that just to not do that, do that while you guys are watching. But if you can find a book that has more of a canvas cover on it, that would be better, or something that's doesn't have that laminate on it, that's going to be better to work with. But I'm just trying to make do. This is just for fun, so I'm exploring using this. So that's what I'm going to be working on, and I will be gessoing that in just a minute. And then of course you'll need some paints. Now I would maybe select a few paints ahead of time, maybe your colors. So let your intuition guide you, or you can select maybe the primary colors if you're not sure where you want to go. I would say you could do the primary colors, the red, yellow, blue, and then decide as you go. Otherwise, select your palette. Now, I would suggest, if you're new, to either select colors that are close to each other on the color wheel, analogous colors, or just pick two of the primary colors, like let's say blue and red, or red and yellow, or blue and yellow, because working with those two, those are going to make all of these colors, and they all work together. So it's basically like analogous colors. So if you just pick two of the primary colors, you're going to know that they're going to work together, and you're going to get a nice color palette. Now, the colors that I'm working with are not analogous colors. They're actually the colors across from each other. They're contrast colors, and they have a lot of, or that's not the right word, not contrast colors. They're complementary colors, but they're high in contrast. So this red, orange, and this blue, green, and they really make each other pop against each other. So you can see when you look at this, that blue, that turquoise really pops against those warm reds and oranges, and they just make each other have a lot more energy. It's great. You just have to be careful not to mix those two colors together, because they'll make a gray and they'll subdue each other. So I make sure that when I'm putting those two colors down, I make sure that the paint layer below is dry. Otherwise, you can use those colors together perfectly fine. So you can choose your color palette, throw some paints around you that you're going to be using. Now, the ones I'm going to be using, like I said, is the turquoise and the warmer red, the cadmium red, the cadmium orange, and I also have Payne's gray for my black. It's kind of a blue black, which is a nice contrast with the warm reds as well. And then I also, of course, have some white. And then I also just have nearby, I don't know if I'm going to use this, but this is a crackle effect. So it's white and it'll crack when it dries and create some color underneath. I just have it nearby because I think it's cool and I'd like to try using it. I haven't actually used it for a project yet, so it's something I want to try. And that's what you can do too. If there's something you haven't used that's in your palette or that's in your toolbox, grab it so you can give it a go. Speaking of tools, I'm just going to talk about some of the things I'm going to have handy, but really just about anything can be a tool for this process, because you're just going to be basically, making some marks. So I have a whole toolbox of things that are going to be able to make marks, and I'll introduce these a little bit in more detail in just a second. But then, of course, I have 2 jars of water, nice big jars of water, because I'm working with acrylics. And I want to keep everything rinsed pretty quickly, because I don't want the acrylics to start drying on any of my tools or anything that any brushes or anything that I might use. And then I like to have a wet rag and a dry rag. And this is just an old t-shirt. This is just a microfiber that had seen better days, so I turned it into my acrylic rag. All right, so now let's talk about some of the tools that you can use to create the marks that we're going to be making. You can use toilet paper rolls or paper towel rolls to make like a stamps. So anything can be a stamp, anything that's got some interesting shape to it. This is a dryer ball. This is from probably Starbucks or some coffee shop. I also have a rubber glove because I like to use my fingers, and I am working with cadmium, and cadmium can be toxic. It's a heavy metal, and so sometimes they have something in them that may not be healthy, and I oftentimes do use my bare hands, but I don't recommend that, just because you never know what's unless you know for sure what's in your paint. So if you're using a more organic paint or something, that's probably safer. But so I just have a rubber glove here that's ready for my fingers. I use a lot of my fingers. I think that's really fun. I also have a brayer. There's different sizes of these where you can roll paint on. I can scrape shapes in there with a popsicle stick, or I'm not even sure what this is for. It could be for I don't know, making wool, or I just really don't even know what that is. So anything that has some fun, shape to it, you could potentially use as a tool. This is for sculpting clay. This is actually, I got at a hardware store, but this works really good as kind of a spatula to spread paint around. A doily could act like a stencil. I have lots of different stencils here that are available, and stamps, rubber stamps could work. More stencils. This is also from a hardware store or spatula. You can use the credit card. These are, I think, cake decorating tools. So there's lots of cake decorating tools that work great. You can use bubble wrap as stamps. You can use, of course, masking tape to create to mask off areas. Even lace can maybe create some texture, string, and just a variety of little kitchen tools. Like this is, I think, for pie making. I even have a saw. So I just brought a bunch of just different interesting, funky. There's actually an art tool. So a palette knife. So any of these can potentially become a tool that I can use for creating some texture or moving paint around or removing paint or what have you. There's basically 6 methods to make your marks. You can basically apply paint. You can move it around on the canvas. You can mix it right on the canvas. Now, I didn't use a palette at all. I just put all the paint directly on here and then moved it around from there. But I can mix colors straight on the canvas. I don't have to mix them ahead of time if I don't want to, or I can. It's really up to me. You can layer, of course. You can lift paint by either scraping with a small tool or even with like a spatula type thing to see the layers underneath. You can mask it. So those are 6 methods you can manipulate the paint and create dots, lines, shapes, patterns, or textures in your art to get to some interesting background. And the early steps in this process, a lot of that's going to be covered maybe in the end. Some of it I can see underneath. I can see just the texture of some things, and some things I can actually see a little bit of a shade of it. But all the layers just make it really interesting, and you just don't know where it's going to go. So let's play around. The other thing I like to have handy is a spray bottle. And I also have some of this acrylic pouring medium mixed with some water in a spray bottle, so I can actually thin out some of my paints, because I'm using heavy body paints, which aren't great for when you're trying to make drips and things like that. Now, in this case, I've talked about, don't add more than 25% of water to your paints. And that is just for their ability to, stick to the surface. But if you're doing layers and it's not really going to be the foundation of your painting, and you add water to get drips and things like that, I think it's not going to be, I don't think it's going to be a big problem. I think you're going to be okay. I just wouldn't start a canvas, especially with a really thin, watered down underpainting. That's when it's really going to be a problem, because then that base layer could potentially peel or lift or crack, because it's not going to be that stable. All right, so I'm going to start with just a layer of gesso. Hello, everyone. Just a reminder to please like, subscribe, share, and comment if you find this content helpful. Thank you, and let's get back to the program. Now I got my paints primed and I can start just adding stuff. So I'm just going to start off with my good old credit card scraper. Gift cards, credit cards. And I'm just going to literally like squeeze it right on there, my paint. Put it in a few different places. And then I'm just going to play around, move it around. Hopefully that inspired you and rather than overwhelming you, but I just wanted you guys to see how many different techniques and tools and fun things you could do just by playing. I mean, like I said, and if this was just a cereal box, you know, you could do it and then you could always frame it if it turns out. If it doesn't turn out, you just, like I said, you can paint right over it. But I'm really liking how that's turning out, to be honest. I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure, but that's the thing, is I'm never sure. It's like, you know, you're not done until you're done. So you have to be patient. You have to be willing to be brave. Go ahead and try something and keep going until you either like it or are ready to gesso over it and start over. Thank you everyone for joining me for this episode of Healing Art After Hours. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share and comment if you find this content helpful. And as always, goodbye and happy creating. Bye.